Hi, this is The Greatest Story Ever Played. I'm Dan, and today I'm going to be talking about what remains of Edith Finch. So, a description for this game is: What Remains of Edith Finch is a collection of strange tales about a family in Washington state. As Edith, you'll explore the colossal Finch house, searching for stories as she explores her family history and tries to figure out why she's the last one in her family left alive. Each story you find lets you experience the life of a new family member on the day of their death, with stories ranging from the distant past to the present day. So, background on this game is it's developed by Giant Sparrow, whose first game was called The Unfinished Swan, and What Remains of Edith Finch is their second. So, little info there. So, as the description said, you go through this house. It's this mansion with rooms added on and secret passages and clutter everywhere, that sort of deal. And you end up kind of going room to room, learning a little bit about the past, about different people who lived in that home, whether your own siblings or your parents or grandparents or further back family. So that's kind of how the story is told. And each story ends up being told through a specific event from that family member's life, which I guess with the description, it would be their death. Sometimes it was a little confusing to me if they died then, but that's neither here nor there. You got a little snapshot into their life, which was pretty interesting thing to do. I guess style of this game too, before getting into it, is it's definitely more of the quote-unquote walking sim style, where it's similar to like a Firewatch or a Dear Esther or something like those games. So you can interact with the world around you, but you more or less are set on a path that's pretty straightforward and your actions are pretty limited. You can't like pick up everything or do all the things. Instead, it's like you can open this window or go through this door or whatever, that kind of thing. So that's kind of the style of game it is. As you go through the house and going to each room, Edith has this piece of paper that has a family tree written on it with people's names, and then when you hear their story, she ends up coloring them in on it, or drawing them in on it. And that's kind of how you keep pace with where you're at and also, who you know about and what have. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to go through it how it went through in the game. Instead, I'm going to go kind of family tree oldest to present day. That seemed to be best in my book. Your first person in the family tree is Odin. He lived from 1880 to 1937. And you learn his story from a slideshow of how the Finches came to the United States. So I don't know if you remember those slideshow things when you were a kid, where you'd like pull the right side and it would switch the picture over, and you'd pull it again and then switch the picture over. It was that style. So this was a cool way just to kind of see, okay, the Finches immigrated here, here's how they got here, here's what happened, that kind of deal. His was good for setting the stage, I would say, for the Finches. Perhaps one of the lesser entertaining stories, but it certainly set the stage, which is important. The next up, we have Molly, and she lived from 1937 to 1947. And the story is about her waking up and eating everything. Edith goes and looks and reads her journal, and it's this journal entry from Molly about how she woke up and ate everything. And it starts off, she wakes up. She tells us that she went to bed without dinner because her mom sent her to bed. And so she eats what she could find. She finds something in her room. She recognizes her Halloween candy is gone. She eats some berries off of, it looked like decoration. She eats a bunch of toothpaste. And then she says that she turns into a cat. And she's on her tree and she's chasing after this bird, which she ultimately gets. Then she ends up becoming a bird, and while she is a bird, she's chasing down rabbits and scooping them up and eating them. After this, she becomes a shark, and then as a shark, she's going and she's eating sea lions. And then after this, she ends up becoming a monster, which It looked like octopus legs. I don't know if it was like a different creature than that, but a monster, and her tentacle like slithers onto the boat and pulls sailors down and eats them. Ends up back in her room, and it kind of ends with, and the monster was under my bed, and I knew it wanted to eat me, but I knew if I went to bed it wouldn't eat me. So I didn't want to go to bed, but we both knew that I would be delicious. And so very cool, super creative here. I really liked this. This was one of the first ones in the game that you get of a backstory. It was fascinating. Really cool how this was done. Next up, we have Barbara. And she lived from 1944 to 1960. And she was a child star. In her room, you see posters and stuff from when she was in a movie as a child. And the story told about her is actually through a comic book that's in her room about her death, which Edith was sort of surprised that that's what would be inside the room. And this is super cool. You end up opening up the comic book, and the story is told through the comic book, so you're kind of going through the pages. Occasionally you're interacting within them. Other times you just are seeing it go and the word bubbles and stuff. It was pretty cool. And the premise of the comic book is that Barbara was trying to get revive her movie career. So she was a child star. She had the signature scream that was excellent. But now she's a teenager, her scream isn't as good, but this is her kind of chance to bounce back. She's in a horror film, she'll get to unleash the scream and show that she still got it and could become a star. And so her boyfriend is trying to scare her to elicit the scream. It doesn't really work, and she gets mad, her boyfriend throws him out, but then there's a person who, I feel like very like 50s style killer, like a man with a hook for a hand, which was funny, ends up being in the house and hunts after her. While this is going on, the Halloween music from the movie Halloween is going, which is incredible. I actually looked online, and they got it authorized to use that from John Carpenter, and they were even going to maybe have him do it himself. But then he just ended up authorizing something, which is super cool. To get the Halloween music going, it made this comic book scene especially cool. She's running from the hook hand, ultimately thinks she's going to be killed, and then there's a surprise party for her, and it's a bunch of monsters in costume, but somehow she dies in it. I was a little confused here, to be honest, but I might just be dumb. But I loved this. I thought this was very cool. Comic book style going through it was awesome. Halloween music, excellent. Really cool. Also, Barbara, I don't know if this is Night of the Living Dead, I think, reference. We're coming to get you, Barbara. But it was cool. Very cool. I liked Barbara a lot. That was a good story. Next up, we've got Calvin. And he lived from 1950 to 1961. And you learn this story from a letter from Sam that's about Calvin. And Sam is Calvin's twin brother. It's about how Calvin was, always determined. Once he got it in his head that he wanted to do a thing, he would do it. And your action learning this story is Calvin trying to swing all the way around on the swing set. And so you're swinging, and you're pumping your legs, and you're going further and further, and you're hoping to go all the way over and do a complete turnaround. You seemingly get it as the story ends, and it leads to your demise. This was pretty cool. The motion was really trippy on this, too. It really felt like you were swinging. My head was just like, whoa. So that was cool. Next up, we've got Sam, 1950 to 1983. And this story is told through taking his daughter, who is Dawn, I believe, who's Edith's mom, taking her on a hunting trip. And through this memory, you get to take varying photos of what's going on. So you could take a picture of your dad, you could take a picture of a lake, whatever it's going, and you're going hunting to shoot a deer. Ultimately, you see the deer and you shoot it, and are going to take photos with it. So your daughter's up there, and she's sitting by the deer. She's just sobbing, which was sad. And you're setting the camera up on a timer so you can run over there and be with her and the deer for the kill. She says, "Hey, the deer is kind of twitching. I'm worried about this." And you're like, "Nah, it's normal." And you get down there to pose. The deer twitches and it knocks you off this cliff, leading to your demise. I laughed. I thought it was kind of funny. That one felt like the good dark humor in it for sure, compared to some of the other ones that just felt sad. But this one, what I thought was, I don't know, a couple of contrast of things in here. So I've never went hunting or anything like that. So, I don't have personal experience in this, but I could definitely see if you're a person who grew up hunting that you'd want to take your kids, that's an important thing. And so you'd take your daughter to, you got to shoot a deer. I could see why someone would do that. That makes sense. I could also see why you would need to cry a lot after your first deer kill. Imagine that's a pretty tough experience. I could see why Dawn would be doing them. I also can see why you would take a photo of that moment. But if your kid is sobbing after killing the deer, I don't think that's probably the Kodak moment. It seems like you should save that for another time. Maybe just get a picture of the deer and move on. But whatever. I don't know. It just kind of struck me as funny, and for people to die in such a silly way, it kind of fit, I thought. So that was funny. Next up, we've got Walter, who lived from 1952 to 2005. And we find out that he actually lived in the basement of the Finch house for 30 years. It seemed he essentially got maybe spooked about the outside world, or just decided he didn't want it anymore. And so he just lives in this basement. And he tells us about the story about how he did the same thing over and over. You'd think living by yourself would be too hard, but no, I can do it because of my routines, that it's fine. And so he's doing them, and there's a noise that you can kind of hear through the basement on kind of the other side of the wall. And used to always make noises, and it was like, I was afraid of it for a little while, and then I just decided that's just how it is. It's not a big deal. Then one day the noise stopped. After the noise was gone for a week, I decided, all right, I've got to go find this noise. There's the monster there, whatever. I have to deal with it. So he breaks through the wall, and he's walking in this hallway. Yeah, this hallway of sorts. A big light comes, boom. Hit by a train. It was under a train tracks. A train tracks went under their home. And he's killed by it. Yep. Next up, we've got Gus. And Gus lived from 1969 to 1982. And this story takes place at the beach of the Finch house, where his dad is getting remarried. And Gus was pissed about this, so he said, I'm not coming to the wedding. I'm just going to fly my kite here, and you can't, I'm not going to participate, basically. I don't need a stepmom. And so through it, Gus is just flying his kite. There's different things going on. You find out there was a storm, so everyone moved from the beach to a tent next to the beach. You keep flying the kite. Ultimately, this hurricane of sorts, or tornado, some sort of natural disaster sets in. It picks up the chairs and stuff that were there. It picks up the tent. It ultimately picks you up. And the narrator in the story, Dawn, she says, I wish I could say that I wondered where you were during this time, but I didn't, and I only thought about it once we found you. So, tragedy again in the Finch household. The next one is Gregory, who lived from 1976 to 1977. And we learn about this from a letter in his crib, and it's from his father to his mother. And the story picks up, and he's taking a bath and talks about how he was such a happy kid. that, he was always laughing to himself as if you weren't in the room. He was cracking up. He was so smiley, this kind of stuff. And the kid is Gregory. He's in the bathtub, and he's got like a frog and toy duckies and all of this. And you end up playing as the toy frog, and you're just like swimming around, jumping on things, knocking other toys over. There were ducks that were in like bubbles floating, and you like pop the bubbles and they fall into the tub that you can play with too. And his mother comes in and says, okay, we're going to get you out of the bath, drains the water, and then she gets a phone call, and she answers and says, oh, I don't want Gregory to hear this. Gregory, stay here. I'll be right back. And then in the bathtub, the water gets going again. And you play with the toys for a little while, but then you switch from being the frog to being Gregory, and you're kind of underwater, under the sea. And then you go towards the bathroom, the clogger in there. And yeah, that's the story. This one was really sad. This really bummed me out. I had to walk away from the game for a few minutes because this fucking sucks. This is just rough. The playing in the bathtub was pretty nice, but this was super sad. So I had to take 5 for sure. Rough stuff. Next up, we've got Lewis. And Lewis lived from 1988 to 2010. And Lewis was one of Edith's brothers. He's a pothead of sorts. Definitely based on his room, he had like a legalized marijuana poster and like a lava lamp and like typical quote-unquote pothead stuff, but also seemed to have other stuff going on. Perhaps he was a heavier drug user, different things like this. So you learn this story through a letter from his psychiatrist to his mother about had kind of went on. And Lewis worked at a cannery, so he worked at this fish shop where chop the fish's head off, send the fish down the conveyor belt, and they end up being put into cans. That's his job, and so it's pretty monotonous. And what you end up having is the story be told while you are simultaneously cutting the fish, which was mind-numbing. This was very emotionally powerful. They connected this very well. So you're, move the fish over, chops the fish off, heads off, throw the fish, grab another one, you do that. So you're doing that, but as the story is being told, it says that Lewis had this giant imagination. And it starts describing his imagination. First he becomes mayor of Lewistown, but then he's king, but then he sets out on a voyage, and he keeps conquering new towns. So there's like St. Lewiston, New Lewistown, Minneapolis, except Lewis is at the end. It's pretty funny. He's going through, and then it's ultimately that he is going to meet this queen. You have the option to either meet a prince or a queen, and then attributes about them. Ultimately going to meet the queen. Last thing to do is put the crown on his head, and you can see a guillotine of sorts there. You lean your head forward to put the crown on, and then you go back to the letter, and you know what happened next. He canned himself. Woo! It was crazy. Super, super trippy being there. Next up, we've got Milton, 1992 through 2003. And what you get is this flip book of a magic paintbrush. And you're going through, and in the magic paintbrush, he ends up like painting a door. And then he paints a handle on it, and he's actually able to open the door and go through. And Milton actually disappeared. So he doesn't die, like on his tombstone in the family graveyard next to the house, which is a whole other thing that we can come back to. But It just says 1992. It doesn't have a death date, but in Edith's little map that she's drawing as it goes, she does put one. So he goes missing one day and is never seen after this. He disappears, which is sad. And in their house, you see a lot of these missing posters for Milton. So that was pretty rough. That was pretty rough. But so I guess now that I'm on the topic of it, the graveyard. So inside the Finch house, there's a section of a graveyard for all the family members, which is unique for sure. And that this family has lived here for generations at this point, just adding on to the house more. But then also there's a pet cemetery in it, which I thought was amusing. Both as being a Stephen King fan, I don't know if that's a reference there or not, but the pet cemetery, it's pretty funny because if you look at the tombstones for the pets, they all have very silly names. Like there was Derpy, Derpy 2, Werpy, Chirpy, Burpy. Like they all have names like that. So the kids were definitely silly in the naming of their pets back then. So, or in the Finch household. So that was pretty funny. The last main sequence you get is about the night that they left. And so Edie, who is the grandmother, Dawn, the mother, and then Edith, the character you play up as, are at dinner. And Edie leaves this book to Edith about her story. And you get sent away from dinner because Dawn and Edie are fighting. And so Edie's like, oh, go to the library. I left you a present. And it's this story written down. And you hear this argument between Dawn and Edie that Edie says, Dawn says, all of our family has died. This is because you want to tell these stories. This is your fault, essentially. And Edie, on the other hand, is like, no, these stories need told. They're important part of our history, basically. And so you hear the fight, and then you're reading through, and Edie is telling you the story about how one day she woke up and the water had really receded by the side of their house. So much so that the old house could actually be walked to. And so you start, then you transform, you're into Edie's mind, and you're walking towards the old house. And there's been this old house with like a red light in the distance in the middle of the water that just looked like junk or like a barge or something like that. It turns out it's their old house, the original Finch house that got built when they first all moved here. And you're walking out towards it, you're getting closer, but then your mom comes in and sees what you're reading, and she grabs the book, and you guys both pull, and it rips apart. After this, your mom literally just grabs you, throws you in the car, and you guys leave immediately. You don't finish packing. You're done. We are out of here. They leave. You find out that Edie dies that night, and no one has lived in the house since. After this, Dawn and Edith are on their own. They traveled from place to place, but they never really connected somewhere. Dawn ultimately gets sick and dies. There's a sad part here where you hold hands with your mom on her way out. Ooh, that was rough. Then it's Edith writing this story to her unborn child. A little bit earlier in the story, you find out that you're pregnant in it. Edith says, climbing through the Finch house, like, I didn't really want to do this, and if I knew there was so much climbing, I don't know if I'd do it because I'm pregnant, or whatever. So you hear that, but then back at the end, it comes back to being pregnant. Edith is writing this story so that her unborn child will be able to read it someday. And inside this, it looks like you're kind of in utero, kind of. So it seems like it's yeah, I don't know, kind of looks like that. You're inside. It's like colorful and stuff like that, though, so it doesn't look like an actual human body, but that's the vibe I got. But Edith is writing this story in hopes that her kid, who will be born, will be able to read it, but she says, maybe it's dumb that I'm writing it down because I am hoping to just be able to tell you these stories myself. But if you are reading these, it's because I'm not here to tell you them. And then it pans out, and there's a young boy at the grave of Edith Finch reading these stories. End. All right. So, I don't know. I'm a big fan of this game. I thought it was fantastic. Most definitely the best quote-unquote walking sim that I've played. And I thought, more than Firewatch or Dear Esther or some of the other ones. And I really like Firewatch. I think it is a good game. But I thought What Remains of Edith Finch was absolutely fantastic. I thought that the art style in this was really cool. Just the creativity that was expressed in these variety of stories was, top tier, really. I think if anyone is pursuing any creative undertakings, the 2.5 hours or 3 hours or whatever it takes to play this game are well worth investing. I thought that just the creative, visuals, the way to tell these stories, and just this unique premise and everything. I don't know. I thought it was great. I think that there's a lot of ways this story could have been told that could have been less engaging or less good or I don't know, anything like that. I thought that they really hit it home, and I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for the next game they create, because this told stories in, I thought, a pretty unique way, and it was pretty noteworthy. So I thought that was really cool. Another thing in the game that I really liked was there were books scattered everywhere. On each, floor there was books. In different rooms there were books. And throughout that, it seemed that they were even specified, the books were specified kind of to the individual who they would be for. So in the kitchen there were like all these cookbooks. Or in, I think it was Walter, in the basement, there were all these like books on like exorcism and like shit like that. So it was kind of cool to see the books that were on there. And two books I noticed, I was trying to read them occasionally to see what books were there and if they're real ones. I did see 2 real ones. I'm sure there were more, but I saw Call of the Wild and Oryx and Crake. So that was cool. Call of the Wild by Jack London and Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. I thought that was cool to see some real books just listed in there, and I'm sure there were more that I missed. I thought that was pretty cool to see, just being a big book nerd like I am, to just see books shouted out was pretty enjoyable. As a mild critique on there, it was also pretty evident that they made maybe, 10 or 12 books that they gave titles to, but then they just copied and pasted them throughout the room. So, there would be 8 copies of Call of the Wild or something like that. And I'm not a game developer, and I don't know how many people bothered to look at the books besides me anyway. So I get why they would do it. I 100% get it. As a personal book nerd, I would have loved to have seen 200 books get listed through the house or whatever, but I also get 100% why they didn't. And putting titles down versus it being nothing or something generic like history book, still very cool. So mild complaint, but really, I don't know. That's super minor, and probably almost no one noticed. I just happened to, because I'm a book nerd. But I guess on the other side, if that's my main critique, or one of my critiques, you made a pretty fucking good game. So, good job, guys. So that's a couple general thoughts. But I wanted to bring some listener feedback then on this. Some of your guys' thoughts here. So first I've got from Weird Wolf on Twitter, and he said the game was brilliant. I agree. Very, very good. Very good. Next up, we've got Chris on Twitter, who said he loved it. It was a really good story, and the graphics were fun. I thought so too. I thought the graphics looked really good. There were a couple times where he looked at photos of people that looked really good, or seeing people occasionally. For being an indie game, it looked really, really good. Sometimes with indie games, The looks department goes down, and that's fine. You kind of know what you're running into. But this game looked pretty good, actually. On top of having an awesome story. Next up is Escartot Escarlot. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. On Twitter, he said, "Beautiful game with a story to match. The story does have some problems, in my opinion, but has enough ways to engage me to overcome them. Quirky humor, the ending was unexpected for me." Yeah, I found the humor pretty funny and quirky too. I was trying to describe the game to my wife, and I brought up that it had some kind of Coen Brothers-ish feel. Like I know it's different, but they definitely hit up darkness and humor where you can kind of laugh at it, like the guy getting knocked off the cliff by the deer that he thought was dead or something like that. Like it's funny and weird kind of thing. So I kind of described it that way. I thought the humor was good, and the couple laughs that were in there were definitely helpful to kind of counteract some of the more sadness there, and made a topic that's heavy like death be able to be more palatable, I guess. There's definitely a version of this game where it could just be really harsh and unenjoyable. And instead, this one was not that. Instead, it was very enjoyable. And, sadness at some parts, but a lot of it not really, despite the fact that it's how everyone dies. And Alzared on Twitter said, "I loved every minute of it. It was creepy and sad. The Finch family really was cursed, it seems. The sad twist at the end was unexpected as well." Yeah, the Finch family certainly does seem cursed. That basically all of them died as children, or fairly young. That was pretty rough to see. Just man, no one made it too long, and I don't know what the curse would be. Is it that you're acknowledging the curse that makes it true? I'm not sure. I don't know how that works. I wonder if Edith wouldn't have written this down if her kid would have been free from the curse. That makes me feel like, it's coming for him next, kind of. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. Definitely feel cursed. And agreed with Alzared and also Escarlot on the ending. Definitely sad and unexpected. I thought that we would stay with Edith, and it was a surprise that she hadn't made it either. And I think I liked that surprise happened. Because your character development was really with their family, so it kind of makes sense that it would happen to Edith. It didn't feel like killing off Edith was like an unnecessary gut punch, but it almost was like, oh, and that's the whole Finch family, except, now the kid or whatever. So, I don't know. That was something. I was definitely surprised. Brian on Twitter said, "Overall interesting when gameplay correlates to the story. It's goddamn magical. The factory being the best example." Yes, the story and the gameplay, very much so. Each thing that you did in the gameplay, same thing with the story. The factory with Lewis chopping the fish, and you'd also use your hand to navigate your kind of imagination world on the side. Which was kind of hard to keep it going straight. I kept being worried that I might accidentally chop my hand off. So there was some healthy fear, I guess, in that for me. Or being Molly and being like the bird getting the rabbits. You did the flying, and then you did the swooping down to get it, or the shark going after the seal. Super cool. Very cool that you learn the story by acting it out in some regards and stuff, that was your action. That was cool. And then Epic Glitter, great and powerful game, also pretty cool for Southern Asian rep. I won't soon forget that whole sequence with Lewis. Yes, powerful, yeah, great point with the great Southern Asian rep. So we find out through the story that Dawn, Edith's mom, marries a guy named Sanjay from India, and she moved there right after graduating high school. She moved there, got married to him, had Edith's brothers and her ultimately, and so that's pretty cool. I think the Finches might be Norwegian from Norway, something like that. And I forget theirs. You learn it with Odin at the beginning, but honestly, I don't remember now. So that's pretty cool. The kind of two cultures coming and having that. So you only got a little bit on Sanjay, but that was pretty cool that they did that. And agreed. I definitely won't forget that sequence with Lewis either. It was super trippy. I felt the monotony. And, I was probably in that scene for 5 minutes or something, not even that long, but I felt it. I really, really felt it. And felt the imagination and the trippiness there. That was super wild and super effective storytelling. So, well done again by the team there. And then last, I've got Nikki on Twitter, and she said, I watched the gameplay vid, and it's amazing. I like the story and the flashbacks that tell the story. Yeah, what an effective way to tell the story. I agree. Just getting these moments of time with the characters. It's quite good. I have to say, I've never seen such beautiful subtitles before. I thought they looked really good, and it was really fun with the subtitles, because some of them you would knock the words over and new words would come up, or just how they looked, or they'd put them on different parts of the screen as I was going. It was really good. I tend to play my games with subtitles on, like a Telltale or Life is Strange or something like that, because I don't want to miss anything. And this one, it was cool that they were just built in and helped to aid the story. Really, really like that. Also said the graphics are super pretty too. And then last, should I feel bad for laughing when the deer pushed the guy off the cliff? If you need to feel bad, I also need to feel bad, because I laughed. I thought that was great. It was pretty funny, especially with so many of these people dying as children, and then it's like, oh, this guy makes it to adulthood, but then he just fucks it up anyway. That's funny. Yeah, I thought it was amusing. So, I don't know. If you're supposed to feel bad, then I guess we both have to, but I thought it was funny. Yeah, so that's what remains of Edith Finch. I really, really liked it. If you have not played it, I highly recommend watching a gameplay video or putting it on your, PlayStation wishlist or Steam wishlist or whatever, and picking it up or waiting for it to go on sale, and then picking it up then. It's really cool. Really, really cool. I'm very happy with this game, and am really glad I played it, and even am somewhat disappointed that I hadn't played it sooner. It was cool. Really cool. So, yeah, I guess that's the game. If you have other comments, please write in at TheGreatestStoryEverPlayed@gmail.com or on Twitter at StoryEverPod. Please also rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. Anything you can do to let other people know about our show, that you enjoy it, and hopefully also other people who enjoy story-driven games. We want to just, keep building up this community of people who are into this stuff. So please do that. And we will see you next time.